building today. So welcome to the Legislative Chamber. Like I said, this is the heart of our building. Whenever Parliament is in session, these doors are closed and these seats are occupied by all 93 members of the Legislative Assembly, MLAs, who work in this building and represent everybody in British Columbia. On the left-hand side of the chamber here is where the government of the House sits. So the government is determined by whichever political party wins the majority of seats in a provincial election. It's that simple, majority wins. Currently, the government of British Columbia is the NDP, the New Democratic Party. And on the right-hand side, as you look into the chamber, is where the opposition of the House sits. So all of the other political parties that do not win the election, they do not form the government, they all coalesce and form the opposition. So currently the opposition is made primarily of the BC Conservative Party, but there's also 2 seats of the BC Green Party and 3 seats that are independent and not technically associated with a political party. So even though they are not the government, the opposition still plays a very, very important role because it is their job to scrutinize the government's decisions, question the decisions of the legislature that they are passing and proposing, and make sure that the government is doing the best possible job of representing everybody in British Columbia. This especially comes to a head during question period, which is a period of 30 minutes every day where the opposition members are specifically tasked with asking specific questions of the government. If you have ever seen clips of legislation online where people are yelling, interrupting each other, being very, very passionate, banging on desks, that usually happens during question period. And during that period, somebody else plays a very important role in the chamber, which is the Speaker of the House. They sit at the very back of the chamber in that large wooden chair. That is the Speaker's chair, and the Speaker is in charge of maintaining order in the chamber. They call on members when it's their turn to talk. They shush members when it's not their turn to talk. That happens quite a lot. And also, all questions and statements in the chamber must be directed to and through the Speaker of the House. Another thing about the Speaker is that they are non-partisan. So that's to say that they are not associated with a political party, both in government or opposition, and they do not vote in the chamber except in the event of a tie. That is the only time that the Speaker uses their individual sway. For all other times in the chamber, they are tasked with maintaining order. Up around the outside of the room here, you can see there are public galleries. So whenever the chamber is in session, like I mentioned, these doors are closed. You cannot come into this room, but you can go up to the 3rd floor and sit in those galleries and watch the debates for as long as you would like. This is very similar in concept to our Hansard broadcasting team. You can see there are television cameras poking through holes in the walls, and they record everything that happens in the chamber. They broadcast it live, they archive it on our website, and they publish a written transcript of everything that is said and done. So both of these things are actually very, very important part of this building and of the democratic process as a whole, because these are ways of making Parliament accessible to everybody in British Columbia. If something is said or done in this room, it is not a secret. Everybody in BC, you, me, everybody, we all have the rights to know about it. And that is why these ways of making sure that the public can keep up to date as to the business in this room, those are so, so important. You can also see there are television screens hanging on either side of the chamber. Those are a recent addition. They were implemented in 2020 because of the global pandemic, and so they allow for what's called a hybrid session of Parliament. If a member of the chamber cannot be present in the chamber for whatever reason, they can stream in through the power of the internet and appear digitally on those screens. They were supposed to be temporary, but they actually proved to be very useful, so they've become a permanent addition to this chamber. Yes. Does anybody have any questions at this point about something you see in the legislative chamber, something that you see in this room, or maybe something else related to governmental process or how the whole thing works? Yes?
What is the proportion of women in the members of Parliament?
Excellent question. What is the current proportion of women in the current Parliament? Well, as of the most recent provincial election, we are very pleased to announce that women make up the majority of seats in the chamber. It's never happened before, but women make up more than 50%. I believe the proportion is 53% currently. Women are sitting in the chamber right now, and that's never happened before. And it's a very exciting indication of the process of women earning the right to vote, earning the right to represent themselves and other women in the chamber. That's also a process that we're going to talk a little bit more about once we get to the women's wall, which is downstairs. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned all the transparency here. Do you have secret committee meetings as well?
We do have committee meetings, but those are also not secret. They are also recorded by our Hansard broadcasting team and are broadcasted and archived in the same way, just on different channels. Yeah.
What are the columns made of? The
Excellent
marble
question.
column?
The columns in this room are actually one of the only instances throughout the whole building of building materials that are not locally sourced from British Columbia, because all of the architectural styles throughout the building are largely European-centric, and so the architect was worried that this building wouldn't feel like it actually belonged to the people of British Columbia, that it was too European, and so he used almost exclusively local materials on the inside and the outside of the building. This is one exception. All of these pillars are marble imported from Italy. Another exception is the balustrade around the hole in the floor in the upper rotunda where we just were. That is dark marble imported from Tennessee. Why Tennessee, you may wonder? I think they just wanted the dark marble. And I guess that's the only place you can get it. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
So this afternoon, when is the legislature in session? When you can pop into the...
I believe the session is going to resume at 1:30 this afternoon. And then question period starts after all of the opening member statements have been completed. That can take anywhere from sort of 5 to 20 minutes. So question period doesn't begin at an allotted time. It just begins after all of the opening statements have been concluded. So it's typically 10 to half an hour, sort of 10 minutes to half an hour after the session begins. Yes?
How long would a typical session go?
Well, it depends on the schedule of the parliament that is sitting at the time. The schedule can change constantly. The current sitting schedule, members sit approximately 6 months out of the year, but that's broken up into several different chunks and also different days of the week. Currently, they're not sitting on Fridays, and they only begin in the afternoon on Wednesdays, but they're sitting quite late in the current session. They can sit up to sometimes 9 p.m. The other day, they were trying to pass a certain piece of legislation before the beginning of the month, so they sat until 2 a.m. that night. Yeah, but it's sort of constantly in flux depending on the business and the needs of the legislation that needs to be passed. Yes?
Do people need to be actually in the legislative vote?
Whenever a vote is called, then yes. A certain bell rings, which indicates that members need to make their way to the chamber, and they have exactly 10 minutes to do so, and if they miss their opportunity, then the doors are locked and they cannot vote. Yes, but it is all done in person. And folks, unless they're streaming in a hybrid session, they have to be here in person.
Do they have to then let you know beforehand that they're going to stream in? Or, you know,
Yeah, that,
look up and down out here, going to stream in?
I don't believe so. No, yeah, it has to be sort of an official process that goes through, and yeah. So you can't just like kind of phone in on FaceTime when you are in the bathroom or something like that. It needs to be an official process. I believe you need to be off the legislative grounds in order to authorize it, and there needs to be a reason for you being absent.
Sorry, just another one. Is there any hierarchy to the seating? I mean,
There isn't necessarily sort of a linear hierarchy, but certain people do sit in certain places. The Premier of British Columbia sits in the front row on the government side, 5 seats from the end, and the Premier is surrounded by all of the ministry seats. Yeah, other than that, I believe there's an official seat for the head of the opposition. I couldn't tell you where it is in the chamber, but it's on the right-hand side. But other than that, yeah, there are ascribed seatings, but it isn't sort of a sliding scale of most to least important per se. Yeah. Any other questions while we are here before we head downstairs for the final stop? No, fantastic. Okay, in that case, I'm going to head right this way. Once again, I'm going to use the staircase, but we do have a second elevator if folks would like. It's just down this hallway on the right-hand side.
What is the other question? Positive thinking.